to the marketplace. Now, we are just talking about the path to economic recovery, but before we even recover, there were protests and there were people who were affected. Let's take a look at what the president had to say about that.
Over the last 1 month, the livelihoods and property of many innocent people have also been destroyed, plunging them into destitution and jeopardizing the welfare of their dependents. The government of Kenya will equally take measures to support these Kenyans on the path to recovery of their businesses. I direct the relevant ministries to obtain, verify, and provide accurate data to facilitate appropriate government action within the next 30 days.
Right, that is the President, Dr. William Ruto, talking about some of the steps that the government is going to take, considering that the government spokesperson did say that some of the losses were ranging at about 6 billion Kenyan shillings, and that was even before the last week of protests. Mark, I'll start with you. These measures that the president is talking about to recover, economically, to ensure that the businesses that had been affected will recuperate correctly. What do you think these measures could be?
I think it is hard to say at this stage, but I think there's different ways to speculate and look at it. I think the view here, which has been shared, I think, eloquently by Patrick, is that the government has an opportunity and an obligation to creating the best environment it can to allow businesses to thrive, because those businesses are the ones that allow funds to move. I think that you have businesses that are suppliers, you have businesses that are providing raw materials of finished goods, and so really I think if we're looking at what measures to take, part of it is also to look back at what engineer said, which is what were these measures that were tabled and recommended that the government could consider? Because if we're starting almost from scratch, as it were, going back as far as 2022, then that's how to look at this, less as an obligation and more as an opportunity. I think one of the biggest chances the government has now is to table what you might call more progressive ideas and ideals that meet the business community and private sector with areas it's been asking, recommending, suggesting as far back as last year. And so what might that look like when the government's really coming to the table with a bill that looks like it has incorporated the views, maybe even as far as some of Gen Z's views, but most notably those of the private sector. I think that's the big opportunity in front of us, but it's hard to tell what approach there might be tabling a second bill now.
Right, Judy, this government is very much against subsidies, right? So maybe handouts would be a bit of a reach for a lot of the businesses that were, affected. However, what is the social responsibility of this government to its people, considering some of the losses that they have set themselves?
It is a difficult period because, of course, we are within this very constrained, financial fiscal space. And at the same time, the impacts of the recent protests have really, of course, not only affected businesses, but also citizens. We do have people who've lost their lives. And I think it's also important to acknowledge that there have been losses, to that extent. But I also want to look at it a bit differently in terms of the opportunities for business going forward, in terms of what can we learn in terms of future-proofing business. A lot of the discussions we've had in the past and looking at what is playing out, in our current operating context is that the role of business in society is practically changing right in front of our eyes. And I think this presents us an opportunity to begin to ask ourselves, what is the role of business even in the political space? We know businesses, wield a lot of influence. They wield a lot of they're holders of capital and all these resources that can also be deployed to help us reset, this social contract that has been broken. And so I think looking ahead, it's really to interrogate to what extent can businesses also use their own influence and power to ensure that we are driving economic growth that is inclusive, that is not leaving anyone behind, and that also, respects the rights of people. So we do also see that the private sector also has, a role to play in ensuring that in the way they run their businesses, that they also have to abide by these universal values that we of course all embrace.
Right. And I'll throw your question, Judy, to the right person, Engineer James. She has asked, of course, having what the president has said in mind, she has asked what is the responsibility of private entities and even businesses in the political realms. What do you think these are, and how exactly can the private sector help in ensuring some of these situations do not escalate to protests and riots?
Firstly, I was just going to start off by mentioning that COVID taught us something, that there was a prolonged, distressful situation, and discussions with the government led to, amongst other things, some level of tax breaks or tax reductions, etc. And certainly, depending with how this goes, and we hope that it doesn't take long because of the negative consequences, those could be options. But I would say these, our model at KEPSA is one of constructive engagement, constructive discussion. And what it tells us that now we have to include these younger generations, so to speak, who are adults in their own right, in these discussions, and to prioritize on what it is that the pain that they are feeling, so to speak. For us, in terms of business, the fact that we try and make sure that on every table where there is a discussion on legislation and policy, we are there and we are actively there. And therefore, we need to now see the other facets of our society also take advantage of that. It is amazing that the provision that is in the Constitution in terms of stakeholder consultation, many people don't really engage. Many people don't really read this legislation. There are adverts that come out from Parliament and other government organizations saying, please bring your views. And we somehow seem to be reactive. After things have been passed, this is when people say, oh no, that is not good, that was wrong.
Right.
So we need to have this awareness, this culture of letting people know, please be at the table when these discussions are taking place, collaborating with civil society to create awareness.
Right.
So that people are aware that actually they have their rights here, and not to want to depend on perhaps the political class to interpret for them what it is that is suited for them.
All right.
Then I can also say that in terms of business and how we grow it, we have always wanted a government to rethink the level of domestic borrowing, because the private sector is crowded out of this credit, and currently the credit is very expensive.
Right.
I think it is important for that credit to be, the rates for borrowing to be addressed so that private sector is able to invest. And remember, all entrepreneurs are risk takers, but let that risk be manageable in terms of the cost of credit amongst others.
Right.
And obviously we can never forget issues to do with governance, where we would wish that governance does not disproportionately cost businesses, and to the extent that we become uncompetitive. And the fact that now we have a global treaties where we are part of, we have many trading areas, trading blocks, and it is a pity when we see our products being withdrawn from the shelves on account of their cost.
All right.
So we need to address the issue of cost. But it's a long discussion, but the issue is continue engaging.
Right. Thank you, Engineer James. Now, you've mentioned something very serious and something very pertinent about the rate of credit, especially considering that the central bank rate, which is at 13.0% right now, and, the CBK has been asked to either maintain it or reduce it, considering inflation is doing quite well right now, fiscally speaking, although the dollar is it's rising a little bit. But fiscally speaking, the rates should come down a little bit. Now, Patrick, the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry probably has the widest outreach to businesses, 47 counties. However, something that Engineer James did say is that most of the time people don't have this information to engage with legislators before policies are passed. And when they're already passed is when we say, oh, we don't want that, we don't want to see that, we want it all to go away. What exactly is the KNCCI doing in this part? How exactly can businesses engage more with policies before they're passed?
Good. Thank you. Before I answer that, allow me to revisit what the President has just you see, when you are projecting about the, referring to the last presidential engagement,
right,
when he's talking of the path to economic recovery,
right,
I really want to support the President on that. Because you see, it's not for the first time, and my friend engineers referred to about during COVID. Kenyans are very resilient. Kenyans entrepreneurs are very resilient. During COVID, we were in this space, and I would tell you, we could not believe how we really bounced back. We re-engineered very fast, and that's why you see now the legislature is talking about revisiting on 2022 Finance Act,
right,
which I don't want to talk about. It really had a very good components in it. Now, why I'm saying I support President on that, that we need to come together and see chart a path on how to recover our economy. The last 4 weeks has not been very impressive. One, it has not created a situation where we can attract and even retain both domestic and foreign investors. The demos or the chaos that we have experienced, you can imagine, I don't know, you were in media, how you are feeling it, but our members, people could not transact business. There are a lot of business losses, and therefore we need business recovery.
Right.
Now, who will do it is the private sector. So my advice to the government, and this is free consultancy,
right,
we need to really have rapid economic stimulus package.
Right.
We have experienced it before. In 2007, 2008, the then government resorted to economic stimulus package. And it really worked very fast. That's why I told you Kenyans are very resilient.
Right.
So it can work. But if it is private sector driven, we need to indemnify the businesses that incurred losses.
Right.
Because where I see today, you see our manufacturing is focused to lead us to around, contribute to 1 trillion in a year, which means if the local manufacturing companies could not operate their businesses, then we are losing around 2.86 billion per day.
Right.
So this means we must really see how to support local industries, the manufacturing sector, because these are the industries that absorb our youth.
Right.
Then we need to also check on, like, for example, at the county level, you know, all this affected the countrywide. It really affected the countrywide, even the sectors like tourism. How do we, this is the high season, how do we really build the trust of the tourists so that the hospitality sector would be able to make double profit?
Right.
So, President, I agree with you, and private sector needs to be given space. And that's why now I revisit on the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce with our countrywide outreach.
Right.
This gives us opportunity. I'm telling you, Hibak, that even cross-border traders could not take their products just to Uganda here, to Tanzania here, to Ethiopia, call it, because of the disruption, all the blockages, people, you could not transport your goods. The value supply chain was really disrupted. The mama mbogas, some of them who do not have cold storage facilities, could not sell their mbogas, could not sell their tomatoes. So we need to have a candid, and this when they want to revisit and take stock of the level of damages, I think it should not be left for the government agencies, because they would give wrong data. It should be a private sector driven.
Right.
Like Mike, who is now a researcher, we go back to the root cause and back to machinani and get to know by sectors which were the hardly hit sectors.
Right.
Look at even transporters, people who are on loans, and allow me to revisit on interest rate. Here today, if you walk to any commercial bank and request, let's say you have a big basket, you request for 20 million, and you want to pay it back for within 48 months. Do you know what you will pay back? You will pay back 29.6 million. Tell me which type of business, a medium enterprise, getting a facility of 20 million, after 40 months or 45 months, you will be able to give back the bank at 29.6 million, which means you have to put 9.6 million aside, then you deduct your operation cost, you deduct now your salaries and taxation. Do you think you will really thrive in that business? You may not see the light of the day. That is why most of our SMEs are struggling. And therefore, one of the advice we want to give the government, consider reducing on the cap or the interest rate, because 20.5% is cannot accommodate the MSMEs. Most people fear now taking loans, because even if you take 500,000, you will pay back after 1 year by around 260,000. That is 760. Tell me which business you will transact and pay back bank over $250,000 and still now thrive and meet your obligations. You cannot.
Right.
So we must really revisit on all these economic indicators, by engaging every player, by supporting all the private sectors, so that they really give direction to the government so that we take this country to the next level.
Right, Patrick. I'm glad that you even mentioned that, because a lot of businesses now are thinking, you know, some of them were looted, some of their goods were damaged. They're thinking about what exactly do we do next? What do you think about when you need to get that money? You think of insurance, right? We went and asked MSMEs what they were doing, and this is what they had to say.
Watu wengi hata ukiangalia hii Nyahururu tu utapata milango imeweza kurudishwa, milango mingi imefungwa, na hata wakati huu ndio unaweza kupata kuna mpaka maduka mingi sana za kurentiwa. Wakati huu tupo kwa kuwa sio tu hospitality business, mpaka hizi biashara zingine ambazo hazina insurance. Nimekwambia insurance cover zenye ni mingi, ama zenye watu wameweza kukuja kutuuzia kama watu wa biashara, wanatuuzia insurances za damages kama zile tu za akina comprehensive, lakini biashara huwa inaanguka ni kupata losses so much of the times, na sasa unakuta hakuna mtu anaweza kuja na hiyo policy ya kupata losses, because pia ni risky policy, because unajua hata insurance ni biashara pia.
Ikiwa ni kazi yako imefunjwa na haukuweko, inakuja inasemekana labda ni kwa sababu kuna kitu ilipitia pale na ni ya kawaida, lakini sio ya kawaida. Maana kama ingekuwa ya kawaida hawangefanya ile kazi. Haya, tuseme labda kitu imefanyika na uko kazi na una nafasi wakati wa kutoka, na imefanyika, inasemekana wewe ulikuwa kwa hiyo kazi, kwa hivyo huwezi lipwa. Kwa hivyo ningetaka tuwe tunaangalia ni kitu gani kimefanya hiyo kitu ifanyike.
Katika hospitality businesses tumekuwa affected kwa kuwa, for example, unapopika chakula hiyo siku ya maandamano unakuwa umepata a lot of losses kwa kuwa watu hawakuji town, hawawezi kupata zile chakula. Vile vile hamwezi fanya delivery za chakula kwa kuwa transportation sector pia iko affected. Katika travels and tour unapata katika wakati kuna hao maandamano, hao vijana hufunga barabara, ama vijana tunafunga barabara ili tusikizwa. Ni in good faith huwa tunakuwa tukifanya hayo, lakini unapata biashara zinaweza kufungika kwa kuwa katika travels and tours unapata watu hawezi kupata ile usafiri, na hiyo usafiri ikikosa kuendelea hiyo siku, unapata hao wazungu hawatapatikana, appointments zao zimechange, visa zao zimekaribia, unapata hizo biashara zinaweza kuturuka.
All right, that is what businesses had to say. First, they're pointing out the fact that for a lot of insurance payouts, you know, they either find a loophole, they're not really getting those payouts. Something interesting that Patrick had said was that, you know, a stimulus package for businesses would be really, really good for people right now. Mark, when you listen to what they had to say, and when you even think about what Patrick said, what are your sentiments on this topic?
Yeah, I think you know, some people say never waste a good crisis. And so even a moment like now can really become, you know, in one way, a defining moment for the government of Kenya, the presidency, or really the entire nation as a whole. You know, we know that there's a conversation online about an even larger protest this coming week, you know, on the 8th of August. And so, you know, the question is, what are the signs that would need to be seen that create that goodwill, that create really the expression that says that dialogue is no longer a dirty word. It's no longer a political tool to frustrate or distract or deflect the energies, but instead a place where there can be genuine discussion and debate and hopefully action and follow through.
Right.
So I think for me, if the time is to really be taken advantage of from the fact that, you know, we've had the really tragic and sad loss of life, and an opportunity there to condole, to console, and really just to meet with those who've been injured, affected, and the families of those who are no longer here. The government, you know, continues to have this opportunity to put itself into better and better standing. So if we talk about an economic stimulus package, you know, I think the government has to ask what is the thing that it desires more than anything else,
right.
You know, and whether that's part of the economic transformation plan or it's really just survival mode for the government itself to bring back that legitimacy at a national and county level, especially in the absence of this bill. I think that has to look like what's been said by the panel here, genuine listening. And from the sound of it, I think, you know, almost all three of the panelists here have really had the opportunity to lend voices. So I don't feel the government is deficient in imagination or ideas of what does the private sector want or need. I feel part of that is to show that there's that ability to say we're willing to take a bit of a step back from what's needed now, and in some way, you know, I dare say defer on what's needed government-wise. And so if we see aspects like the cost of credit, I think even for me, just speaking about, you know, employing young people, I mean, I often think, what's the economic incentive to create an opportunity for young people to join? And if that's there in the economic stimulus plan, hopefully it spurs employment as well.
Right. Gentlemen and lady, time has really gone. Right, it's 2 minutes to 10:30 p.m. So I will beg you all to only take a minute as I ask you these questions. Judy, he has mentioned, you know, political goodwill, getting the goodwill of the people. What would you say the government could do, other than maybe even a stimulus package, to get the people back on their side?
Yeah, it's exactly that. I think it's just a demonstration of that goodwill. There's a lot of healing that also needs to happen in the country, and I think it's also an opportunity for us to perhaps even own up that things haven't been going right, things haven't been done right, and as a result, you know, we've had people suffer, we've had loss of lives, and I think ultimately, we all want what is best for Kenya, both on the government side, the citizens, as well as the private sector and all other actors. And I think if we take a moment to just reflect on that, I think we'll be able to chart, you know, a way forward on how to, you know, put back Kenya on a path of progress and at least stability to begin with.
Right. Engineer James, as we start to conclude, of course, you've heard what they said. The insurance is not helping. The government has said, we're going to do something. Tumepanga mikakati, tumeweka kando. What do you think is the one solution that the government could take, short term or otherwise, that could solve this problem for us?
Just listen.
Right.
Just listen and address the issues that are being raised. Where possible, take measures that allow businesses to improve on their cash flow.
Right.
And I think lastly, we accept that the Constitution allows the citizens to demonstrate, to picket, to assemble. Because what was evident is that there were days when that took place and there were no incidents.
Right.
So it means that it is possible to do that.
Right, tried and tested.
Yes. And maybe I would just say that Kenya is still a great country.
Right.
And I'm of the opinion that, yes, we can disagree. But let us disagree to build.
Right.
Not to destroy.
Right. Patrick, last but not least, definitely, maybe if you could just tell us, you know, KNCCI represents, you're the voice of many businesses. Where do we go to next?
Good. Thank you. Allow me to say that when a bird sits on a branch of a tree, they don't fear that the tree or the branch would fall down.
Right.
But they only believe on their wings. And therefore, the trust that the bird has on its wings is what the Kenyan businesses need to have the treasure on. We need to believe in yourself. There is still room to improve. There is still room to grow. Be resilient and get refocused. Government needs to give space and come up with short-term strategies that would enhance onto something that would put food onto the table of the Kenyans. Right. Because I would tell you, the ones who are being referred as to goons, because you cannot carry a cylinder when you are hungry, a cylinder 12 kg, if you had that cylinder in the house. So we need to strategize, support the Kenyans to have food on the table, and let's continue to be resilient. Let's continue to be innovative. One of the quick wins government to focus on investing on ICT to support the youth so that they get more employment. I support the issues of establishment of the ICT centers in the constituencies, but let it be private sector driven so that we support the youth, come up with strategies that would open employment opportunities for the youth.
Thank you so much, Patrick. I've had such a wonderful panel here and we've had such a great conversation. And thank you for being a part of this conversation as well. For the Marketplace, until next week, same time, same place. My name is Zibak Said. Have yourselves a very lovely night.